and Dan Pena, Vice President Dan Pena. Tonight we honor and recognize the lifetime achievements of Ken Thompson, class of 1977. I'm going to let Ken share his Sienna Effect story. But before I invite him to join me on the stage, I'd like to share a few words about Ken. Art historians believe that Michelangelo could look at a block of stone and see the figure waiting to be set free. Siena Heights College recognized the raw talent, spirit, and potential within Ken and gave him the freedom to follow his passion and boldly become who he has become. Ken Thompson's legacy is carved into the history of Siena Heights University. We experience his creativity in the various sculptures that he has created and gifted to our campus. Our community benefits from the vision and leadership he provides for the John D. Wittersheim Sculpture Park and the campus art program. Ken has spent his career growing his portfolio, sustaining his business, and forging his place nationally as an advocate, resource, and educator for artists. In recognition of his 4-decade career and exemplifying the mission of Siena Heights University, Ken received the Honorary Doctor of Fine Arts degree from Siena Heights in 2017. Most recently, Ken and Tim Van Beek designed, built, and installed the Centennial Arch on the Centennial Mall in front of Sacred Heart Hall. It is my distinct privilege to invite my mentor and lifelong friend, Ken Thompson, to the stage.
Wow. I don't know who that guy is, but I'd like to meet him. I'm going to do a couple things this evening, one of which is tell you about my relationship with Siena, which has been literally lifelong, if not more. And I say not more, and you'll understand that in a second. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the Centennial Arch. I want to show you some images and let you see how it came to be. A lot of times people think that artists just kind of pull this stuff out of thin air and it comes into existence. And in fact, this project exemplifies the term art work. Okay. So often the inspiration is about 15 minutes long and we're talking about a year's worth of work. But to begin, my earliest memories of Siena Heights come from when I was 5 or 6 years old. My mother graduated from this institution in 1944. She, in another life, I swear to God, she was a nun. But she was truly a Dominican in the spirit, in the sense of being a Dominican. I had Dominican isms thrown at me from my earliest memories. My mother always used to say, you know, the day is lost unless you've learned something new. And it always rung in my mind. I also used to say, you know, God gave you some special talents. Don't you dare waste them. And then from my father came this sense of community service. My father was huge in community service. I think about the things he did with the Lions Club and the Civitan Club and all the rest of that, and he was doing it right to the bitter end. But to go back to how I came related to Siena, I think I was 5 or 6 years old, and I remember Sister Petronella, and I remember sitting on her knee, playing with things on her desk, and my mother used to visit her often. My grandmother lived here in Adrian, so we'd come to see Grandma, and we'd come over to Siena to visit. And I'm sure there were other friends that we would visit with. Hey, you know, I wasn't taking notes. But, you know, that was kind of a continuous thing through my childhood. No matter where we lived, at some point we came to see Grandma and we came to visit Sienna Heights. And I just had an affinity for this place. And then when I got to the age of college, I had applied for and received a scholarship to Michigan State University. And thinking, that's where I want to go. I went to MSU for orientation weekend. Got the ever-loving scared out of me. That place, you know, when you stand on a campus that's 3 miles long, and you understand that there's 43,000 people that are going to be there, it was daunting to say the least. So I, in the middle of orientation, walked out and stuck my thumb out and hitchhiked home back to Jackson. And didn't say anything to my folks. Other than, you know, I mean, I said nothing about it. And it was getting to be August, and my mother's going, you know, shouldn't you get ready to go to school? You know, don't you got like books to buy? You know, don't you need to, you're like be packing up your stuff? I mean, what are you going to do? And she finally worked it out of me, and I fessed up to the point where my MSU is not going to work out, and it's just too big, and I don't see myself a fit there. And she says, well, why don't you go to my alma mater? And I said, it's a girls' school. And she says, oh, contraire, my son. They've started taking men. Bear in mind, at the time, I'm like 17 years old. You know, you got to remember what 17-year-old boys think about, and it's not their education. And I started doing the math, you know, about the ratio of females to males, and wow, it certainly looked attractive from my point of view. And so I came and I visited the campus, but when I visited, I saw a place that I thought I could fit in. And it was the right size, and the people I met were very kind. They didn't issue me a number, you know. We called one another by name, by first name mostly. And where MSU was, in my opinion, cold and heartless, because one of the first things they gave me was a library card that had a number on it. You know, don't forget that number. You got to know this number for everything. Well, there was no student number that I know of here at that time. So while I was at Sienna, I was affected by a lot of wonderful people. Some of them were faculty, some of them were students. People who became lifelong friends. I mean, I look around the room right now and I see like Trudy McSorley. You know, Trudy and I used to hate each other. We just couldn't see eye to eye on much of anything. But you know what? I love Trudy to death. She has become a close, dear friend. And then I think about the likes of Father David Van Horn. I mean, that man, as far as I was concerned, walked on water. And I learned so much about art history at his knee, generally at Mr. Ed's, or out on Devil's Lake at David's place at 3 o'clock in the morning, drinking beer. But he was constantly the instructor, the teacher, the mentor. And the subject, we were talking about art history. And I learned so much. And then I think about Barbara Senenka. Yes, there's another dear one. You know, Barb, I think about Barb, and Barb, I had drawing classes with Barb, and I had watercolor classes with Barb, and I still remember Barb walking up behind me and going, Ken, you're beating a dead horse. Okay, bring in another horse. But it wasn't all that many years ago. I don't know, maybe 20 years or so ago. I did a piece that's in the cemetery behind the Mother House. And I did it in honor of an old family friend, Mary Philip Ryan, the historian for the Dominicans, referred to in our family as the Fitzpatrick guardian angel. And on the committee from the Mother House to help guide my way was Barb Cervenka. And when we finally worked things through to what was going to be a logical conclusion, Barb says, Ken, we're so glad that you became a sculptor because you really stunk as a painter. Someplace in there was a compliment. But anybody that knows Barb knows that she is a tough sell. She is not easily won over. The woman shoots from the hip, and she's very, very honest with you. But then I think about other folks. Joe Bergman, fresh out of Pratt Institute, his first teaching job. What an amazing printmaker. I think about Frank Manarino, God rest his soul. He was a hell of a painting instructor, even though I stunk at it. Hey, I gave it my best shot. And then I think about the people I met. You know, my wife. Talk about tenacity right here. This woman has hung in there with me through thick and thin for 44 years. If that's not tenacity, I don't know what is. You know, we were talking earlier today in a couple of the classes about, you know, what do you accredit your success in the art world to? And well, first of all, there's luck. But second of all, there's the support of a good spouse. And I can't even begin to discount that belief a little bit there. But, you know, and then I think about people like Tom Rudd. You know, Tom was character all unto his own. To know Tom was to love Tom. And he became my Obi-Wan all the way through life. I mean, Tom was 18 years older than I. He'd had a whole other career by the time he got to Siena and started studying art. I was a smart-ass little kid. Once I made a comment to him when I realized how old he was. I says, geez, you're old enough to be my father. And he says, what'd your mother look like? Swear to God, that was his comment. But kind of puts you into place. But at any rate, we were friends forever. And unfortunately, we lost Tom last December. And I think about Tom, because I could call him up. No matter where he lived, which was all over the country, I could call him and we'd have these wonderful conversations. And he's the one who pointed me in the direction of public art. He was the former director of Art and Public Places for the state of Michigan, and then when John Engler saw fit to do away with that, he moved down to the state of Oregon and actually set up their Art and Public Places program and was the director until he retired. And he was Obi-Wan. He was the one who said, you need to do this. This is a field that nobody's into. You need to do that. You can do it. And then I think about other people. I mean, how about John Kiefer? Now, that's another one. Oh, wretched youth, he would say. Yes, we were all wretched youth as far as he was concerned. But man, if there was ever a person who always had a song in their heart, and I think about Ray Jarbo, you know, just wonderful, wonderful people, and they all came from Siena. They were all part of this institution. They were all people who pointed me in the directions I needed to go. For me, they were the road signs. And all I had to do was follow. They made it easy. And then, you know, Mary and I had 3 great kids. Elizabeth, thanks for coming, honey. And Bridget, who's undoubtedly home watching Ivy, and our son Ian. And, you know, they all came here. Ian was the big holdout. He was the one that said, there's no way I'm going to that place. All you guys went there. I'm not going there. No. If we had a quarter for every time we heard him say he wasn't going to be here. And I used to say to him, don't ever say never. Because just as soon as you do. So Ian goes to MSU. He gets his first degree there and comes back and he decides he wants to go into teaching. So he came to Siena on their program where he got a second bachelor's degree in education. And I remember looking at him going, dude, I told you don't ever say nothing. But, you know, so the legacy continues. I don't know. We've got 3 grandchildren with another one on the way. What do you think odds are, Elizabeth, that maybe we can get one of them to come here? Good man. There's hope for that boy yet. Yep. Bring him up young. But you know, the history in the family goes back a little bit further than Mom. My grandmother was at one time, and I believe it was in the 30s, what they called a house mother here. And it was a day job for my grandmother. And then it was, I knew this, but had forgotten about it, that, and Mary reminded me of it, that would be my great, great, great grandfather's brother, which, okay, any rate, was the contractor who built Sacred Heart Home. What a gas. I'd forgotten all about that. And my older sister, Mary Jo, was always the family kinskeeper, and she was the one who had done the research on that. I thought it was just fascinating to know that. And it's like, oh man, wow. And what became really poignant about that to me was to had the opportunity to do the piece in front of Sacred Heart. Kind of get the feeling I got to go full circle. And so that was, you know, that was pretty neat. But as you can see, I'm cemented here. And I'm so lucky to have had all these experiences. And I'm so lucky to have so many friends who have come this evening. And it's been a blessing to be a part of it. And Peg, I want to, right here in front of everybody, tell you thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You created a beautiful wall, a beautiful sculpture that really represents the Dominican tradition. It doesn't get much better than that.
Thank you. But I got to ask you one question, Peg. When we first talked about doing this, was your vision perhaps not as grand as mine?
What?
Not as grand as mine? Did you think maybe perhaps something a little more modest?
You know what? To be very honest with you, I didn't know what you were going to do, but I wanted you to have license to show us something that you wanted to do.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Artists often don't get that opportunity. And yeah, that's very good of you. Thank you. So for the next part of this, unless you have any questions about my family lineage, you know, I wanted to show you some images of the process of how that piece came to be. Kate, how do we proceed? Oh, by the way, I was treated to a lovely dinner tonight at Sauce. And you know what, Mary? I could have snagged you in on that. Dinner at Sauce. But I had 3 very kind young women take me to dinner. And, you know, at my age, that doesn't happen very often, yes.
Okay, so your first image is up, and I'll just click through when you tell
Oh,
me.
okay, great.
All right.
Okay. So this is a photograph that we took last winter of the site. And, you know, I wanted to show you the format we started with, refresh your memory in case you had forgotten what it looked like. Yes, please. Where did I get married? Rosary Chapel. You know what? We're very possibly we're one of the few weddings to ever take place in Rosary Chapel. Yeah. What's that? Oh, do they? Okay. Because Mary Phillips seemed a little bit amused and amazed when we asked her if we could get married there. Yeah.
There's not many weddings there now,
Yeah.
Ken, I've been here 20 years and I can count maybe 1 or 2 weddings in 20 years.
Okay. So we were special in Lumen Chapel. Well, not Lumen now, but Lumen then. Yeah, by John Kiefer. Yep. So at any rate, this is the format that we started out with. Bear in mind that Tim Van Beek and I worked as a bit of a team to design this. And next slide, please. And it was it's kind of a funny little story. I had Ian put together an image of what this could possibly look like ahead of time, and well, snow was on the ground, and I said, we need apple trees, and he goes, no problem. So he clipped some apple trees from someplace. I said, hey bud, there's one problem with that. He said, what's that? I said, the trees have all got apples hanging on them, and the leaves are green. We do have to make it in the winter. Oh, good point. So this was kind of what was circulating to start with, to illustrate the idea. Next slide, please. And then we do, like I do with all of my projects, I build a maquette or a model of my idea. And Tim and I, once again, working on this, and featured in this model is, that too, I think that was Peg's. That too is there's a mini-me standing in there. I put mini-me's in with all the maquettes so I can determine or illustrate to my clients the size, give something proportional to work with. Next slide, please. And then there was also the plan for the mall area itself. And there's room in this for lots of metaphors. And the most obvious one there is the cruciform. And working with the heritage of the university. And then there's 10 apple trees represented there, which harks back to the day when it was an apple orchard. And we used 10 of them for the purpose of the fact of one for each decade for the 100 years. Next image, please. And then the central point was going to be basically a medallion. It's 2 foot in diameter. It'll be in a minute. You'll see how it's cast in bronze. But this is where we started with a little bit of a change in the university seal and making certain it denoted the 100 years. This was, once again, Ian's effect on the project. And he's like, Dad, here, let me show you. We do this on the laser. And the model was cut out of the laser. Next image. And then beneath this goo that's being poured on it is that medallion, and it's been painted a dark gray. We do that to seal it. And we made a mold. Next. And from that mold, which is made from room temperature vulcanizing rubber, we pulled off a wax. And this is the beginnings of the lost wax process of casting. Next image. And at this point, we are taking the shield and making the ceramic shell mold, which encapsulates the wax for next image, it being burned out. And you see that there is an empty vessel up here, and then that's the piece below for the molten metal to be poured into. Next image. And here it is, pouring metal. You recognize your son? And the metal is being poured into it in the next image. And this is the raw casting after the shell has been broken off of it. It weighs 75 pounds in bronze, a little tough to steal. Yeah, that was the finished weight. Next image. And now it's been cleaned up, and a patina has been applied, and it's been waxed, and that's the nearly finished product. Next image. Also, as part of it, and working back to metaphors for the 4 tenets of the Dominican order, we had, now it's a test. We have, Peg, you may have to help me, we have study, we have community, we have prayer, we have preaching. Not a good time to flunk. So we wanted to, as part of the metaphor, because that's the foundation, we wanted to embed into the foundation those 4 tenets in text. And what Alan's working on here is masking them off with tape to make them easier to clean up. Next image. And this is the beginnings of the foundation. Somebody had mentioned at dinner, it'd be neat to see how this all came together, and we will. And it all starts with digging a hole. First, you got to go down before you can go up. Next. And here you see community, and it's laid out, and it's on an armature that's made out of rebar that's going to get cast into the concrete. Next image. And here you see one of the masons packing concrete beneath the word. Next image. And now they've been poured up around, and you can make out the word study there. It's ready to be cleaned up. Next image. And more of the cement work progressing. And by the way, the cement masons on this job were first rate. They did an absolutely gorgeous job. I've spent a career arguing with masons over the meaning of round. And you sometimes get ovals. And these guys, they were all about the round. And because, you know, it's just got to look right. Next image. More preparation and getting ready for the pavers. Next image. There's a shot of the pavers that were used, and I really like that shade of gray. And here they are laid in and starting to close in the border around it. You know, a lot of times folks don't understand that, you know, they all see the sculpture, but what you really need to do is look down at your shoes and see where the real work went in. You know, I often say half the work is in the preparation of the site and getting it right. The other thing we did with a site that's really subtle is we raised the center of the site 1.5 feet. It's kind of a visual trick to make up for height, make the piece taller, but also helps to add importance to what you're doing, to you know, raise it up so that without even understanding it or being able to articulate it, you realize that this must be important. Next image, please. And right from the get-go, we had to keep that flagpole, but we really wanted to add 2 more, which we added the university flag and the state flag along with the American flag. Next. Now, the process of making the sculpture. Even though you're seeing this in a linear fashion, all of this was happening simultaneously. We did what I like to say 6 months worth of work in 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. So this is a nifty little tool we have that's it's called a Cnc Plastic Table. It has the ability to cut metal up to 1.5 inches thick. And in this case, we were using 1-inch thick stainless steel. And this is the beginning of cutting out parts. And these were the parts that we were making, the verticals. Next. And give you an idea that because those legs are just about 19 foot tall, they had to have seams in them. And in order to weld a seam like that, you grind halfway through from both sides. And then it would take, I believe it was 22 passes with the welder across there on one side. Then you can flip it over and do 22 passes on the other side. Next image. And this gives you an idea of the length of it. We bought a couple of I-beams to use to make a nice flat surface to build on top of. And the I-beams are 20 feet long, and those were just a couple inches on each end was all that was hanging out. Next, please. A view from the other direction. Next, please. And then there's another component of it. The piece has ribs on the outside of it to give it strength. And we went to a company that actually makes repair parts for Great Lakes freighters to roll form those ribs, to put the curve in them that they need to do. It's a place called A1 Roller up in Mount Clemens. It's such a cool place if you're a technique freak like me. You know, I could hang out in there all day long and watch those guys. But this is the machine, and right here in the center is one of our ribs running through the machine that's going to form it. Next image. And there they are laying on the floor with the curve laid into them. Next. And this is putting together the legs. That's Jared there, who's who's making the big flash and welding the middle, and it was kind of funny. The Jordan, the other welder, was videotaping it. He was telling his instructor, he's in welding school right now, and he was telling his instructor about what we were doing. So he took videotape in to show him. Next. And there's one of the legs with all the scorch marks on it. We did what they call a process of stitch welding, which instead of welding those seams solid, we made stitches. They're 8 inches apart and they're 3 inches long. Next, please. And there's my illustrious cohort, Tim Van Beek. We taught Tim how to fall in love with an angle grinder. He never thought he was going to. But, he'd call me up when he had time and say, is there anything for me to grind? It's like, you betcha. Come on down. Next. And now, bearing in mind that our initial inspiration was an eternal flame. And we had some discussion about the idea of the flame and how unpolitically correct, using our natural resources really was. And so we wanted to try to illustrate this. So we built an eternal flame. Initially, we talked about making it out of glass, and that, although it was possible, it wasn't cost effective to work that way. So instead, we just settled on acrylic. Next. And here's some of the acrylic parts that are stacked out and ready to go to work. Next. And this is where they begun gluing together. There's actually 180 pieces in that flame. Kind of an interesting thing I discovered in doing this, my initial idea was to polish the acrylic. And I made up a sample, I got out a flashlight, and realized that, really kind of by accident, that the polished surface wasn't going to work as well as the textured surface. And the texture that comes on it came from the blade of my bandsaw. It's just, it's the way I work as a sculptor. I'm looking at all the marks my tools make, and I'm always registering those marks and thinking to myself, how can I possibly use this in my work? And so by leaving that texture on there, we found it actually works much better in terms of being illuminated. Next, please. It's upside down, but that's the bottom section that was put together. Next. And now becomes, okay, fans, anybody want to guess what this is? Think Back to the Future. The flux capacitor. Okay. Remember when Doc Brown has this sketch on a cocktail napkin? Well, after I drew this out, I looked at this, oh my God. Well, what we were doing was making essentially the brace that holds the whole sculpture together and also supports the flame. Next image. And here's the part being put together. Next image. And here it is being embedded into our flame. Next image. And there it is. It's turned over. It's in the proper form now, and it was getting tweaked. I wanted to make certain that this thing would be waterproof, so I think it was probably the day after this image was taken. I filled it full of water and went back and marked where it leaked. And then got all the water out of it, dried it all out, and then went in and sealed it up. Got rid of the leaks. I just don't want any water forming in it. Next image. And then this is the day of truth. Okay, this is great. All works on paper, doesn't work in actuality. In honor of John, Jamie, what do we have right here? Yes, plumb bob. Plumb bobs, what a cool thing. They point down. And so knowing the dimensions of where it needed to be, we set it up, we registered the piece, we dropped a line down the plumb bob, measured out, and I was 1/8 of an inch off. Groovy. I can live with 1/8 of an inch, yeah. Because we take up for the 1/8 of an inch because in the bottom of each one of these plates are 6 holes that mounted it to the foundation. Those holes are oversized for the size pin we were using. You can move it. Okay. You can, always plan these in. Don't try to make it fit too tight. So, next image, please. this was finishing them up, loading them on the trailer, and taking them off to be sandblasted. We determined that the final finish on it would be a sandblasted finish. And then we modified it a little bit. And some of the ribs that face outward, actually all three of the ribs that face outward, we went back and we put a little bit of a swirl pattern on it. I think it needed to be danced on just a little bit, just a little tiny bit of bling. Next, please. And now it's time to prep for installation. We, the day before, came up, laid down tarps, put out plywood, covered everything where we were going to have equipment sitting, because you got this far, the last thing you want to do is screw up that hardscape. You know, you put a little nick in it and everybody and their cousin's going to see it. You know, the rest of the car looks great, but they all notice that little scratch, right? So we wanted to protect the investment. Next. And this is the day. It went down just like clockwork. I said we'd be done by about noon. We were done at 11:15. We started about 8. I am blessed with a very talented, skilled crew. They are the best. And we augment that with H.L. Green, who's a good buddy and has helped me set many sculptures. And he provided the equipment. And what we did was the piece of equipment on the right was the holder. We put up the first piece, we attached it, it held it in place. And all that machine had to do that whole time is just hold that one. We brought up the next one with the crane. It got bolted in, fastened in at the bottom. Third piece, next one. Third piece goes up. Same thing with that. And then we can take the equipment apart, and there she stands all on her own. Now, there's something really subtle here that a couple people have asked me about. Now, Jamie, I'm really glad you're here, sweetie. Because, you know, John, I love John. He was a great guy, and he meant a lot to me. And in honor of John, on the bottom of this is a stainless steel tip, much like you would find on a plumb bob, that point. So I got my little subtle Wittershine in there, kind of snuck it in under the wire. I'm fessing up to it now. I wasn't going to say anything in advance. You know, now you know it. Hey, it's kind of late. The piece is up. What are you going to do? But now that we're looking at the piece, though, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what was going on here. You may notice that the 3 legs get up to a certain point, and they're all the same when they get right up to this point. But when they get above that, they're different a little bit. And that speaks to diversity. You know, we're rooted down here in the 4 tenets of the Dominicans. We rise up from those roots, and we all go our own ways. We're different people. We're different ethnicities. We're different religions. But you know, we all have the same thing in common. It's where we started with the institution, and this is where we come to. And then in the center is that flame. And a little bit later on, you'll see that flame illuminated. And actually, it's going to be dark when you walk out of here if you got time to look at it if you haven't seen it. But that flame, you know, it's like the spark that started the flame, that started the fire, that burns within. Next, please. And here it is. We took all of our paraphernalia away. I do like the orange barrels. I need to get some. I need to, you know, it's got that, yeah. I gotta get some other images to use, but hey, it's part of the process. Next image, please. Now we're down to the details. Details make everything. This is Katie and Randy, and they got stuck with the unenviable job of cleaning up all that text. But it was important. Next image, please. And Ian's putting a final coat of wax on his child there, which turned out very, very nicely. Next image. And then, you know, I had a problem with looking at those blasted nuts. And so we made these caps to go over them. And it got pointed out to me after we put them on. It's like, you've been playing with Legos too much. It's a fair point you got there. But it trimmed it out nicely because I didn't want to see that utilitarian nut. The nut's there. We can pop the caps off. They're silicone down if we ever need to. Next image. And then, I'm not sure who took the initial photographs.
Scott Hill.
Scott.
Mm-hmm.
And when they first lit it up. Man,
Amazing.
my heart. It's like, Lord, it works. You know, you really don't know. There's only so much you can tell with a flashlight. But the doggone flame glows just like it was supposed to. And I was so happy. I was coming out of my skin. Next image, please. Yeah. And there he is, me and my amigo. Now, Tim had never really made any sculpture of any size. And I said, come along, my friend, I'll show you how it's done. And now Tim's all fired up going, Ken, when are we doing another? And I said, well, we'll have to start shopping and see what we can find. There's work out there. We'll find it. But there we have it.
Thank you.
So, questions, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
You might want to mention that on the outside perimeter, there's still room.
Oh, the very outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. There's another ring around the exterior. And we had a lot of discussion about what that ring could be used for. And I didn't want to rush any decisions about what it could be. We hit the high points, but we wanted to have an opportunity to involve students into it, involve faculty into it and such. And so we have this ring around all the way out to the edge to the grass that we can go back and we can put some text in. We could look at doing images that are cast in metal and embedded in there. There's lots of different things we can do. And I think it's going to become apparent to us over time. We didn't need to rush this part of it. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity here for the public, this community, to have input. And see, when I think about public art, the projects I appreciate the most are the ones that put the public into the art, that they had some sort of buy-in to it, that they had input into it. And we need that component, and that will finish it off. Thanks, Peg. Yeah, Tom.
Did you happen to name the legs? Did you call them 1,
Larry
2,
Moe
or
and
3?
Curly.
What?
No, actually, we did. It was very profound. 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, but nothing further than that.
How's the plastic UV?
Well, what we used is it's acrylic, and it's what they call optical acrylic, and it's coated with an SAR finish, which means it's scratch resistant and it's also UV resistant. It should not. You know, it might not be, but you know, my intent was not for that. So we paid enough for it. It better work. Bryce? Well, wait a second. She's going to bring you a microphone.
How many designs did you go through before you got to the finished piece?
That's a fair question, and I'm not really sure about that, but I would say between 6 and 8. Sitting there cutting up, we were cutting up file folders. So Bridget's going to be complaining to me that we're out of file folders. It's my fault. Cut them all up and used them to build little models and to play with things. And then we started driving Ian nuts and passing on our taped together file folder pieces, and he was scanning them and then going to the laser and cutting them out for us in plywood. Then we could play with them. And what was kind of neat way of thing about working that way is then we got to the final one and we said, that's it. All he had to do is say, well, it's no longer 18 inches tall. Now it's, 18 and a half feet or whatever it was. And it just, the file was already there. So then you could take it to the next machine to cut it.
I just wanted to say, when you started talking about the decision to raise the mound slightly, I just thought, whoa, that's so appropriate, because one of the things I learned in studying the history of the university was that for many, many years there was a mound there. And
interesting.
on top of that mound was a replica of I haven't ever solved the mystery of this, of whether it was a replica or something else, but of the statue of the Sacred Heart. There was outside in front of Sacred Heart Hall on
that's
a
fascinating.
mound right there.
Yeah.
So now we have the flame there. That seems just like it came from above that you had that idea.
You know,
So-
one thing you mentioned the flame. Thank you. One thing I forgot to mention is we have a ceremonial flame that they used at the dedication. Oh, by the way, folks, you've raised the bar on dedications. I'm rewriting my public art Yes, it was. I'm rewriting my public art contract. It has to include, at minimum, a marching band. The cheerleaders and the flag team are optional. You see, prior to that, the high water mark was the 21 gun salute done with cannons, okay, which was for a war memorial, and hey, that was cool, but marching band. But the dedication, by the way, to all of you who worked on it was absolutely impressive, and wow, it was neat. Thank you.
First of all, the online community gave you great props for the Back to the Future reference. So you got some good cheers on that side. And then we have a question from Michael Orlando. He says, do you think that Ken ever embeds a secret message or inscription into his works?
There's a quarter in there.
A quarter?
Yes, it's a superstition for me. I always put a quarter in every piece from the year I made it. It's buried in the foundation. I was up there when they were pouring concrete, and I threw the quarter in. It's just a superstition on my part. Yeah, yeah. So someplace in there, somebody's going to find a quarter someday. Maybe it'll be priceless by then. Please, any questions? Yeah. What was that, sweetie? No. No. And we didn't want to make you have to read your way through the sculpture. Yeah. Elizabeth.
Is it earthquake proof?
You betcha. She wanted to know if it was earthquake proof. Actually, it is. What we did with that project, as we do with many projects, is we sent the ideas and drawings and stuff off to Dan Young, and Dan engineered the foundation and then engineered the sculpture itself. If you were paying super close attention, you would have noticed that the sculpture evolved a bit from the original maquette. And there was the addition of more ribs. Originally in the maquette, there were only ribs on the inside, but when we made it, there were ribs on the inside and the outside. That he increased the dimension of the material to make it out of from 3/4 of an inch to an inch. And it was all about making it stand up against the seismic codes for the state of Michigan and also the wind codes. That thing has been engineered to 140 miles an hour. And I figure if we get 140 mile an hour winds here, you're going to have a hell of a sculpture standing out there and everything else will be gone. But hey, the thing of it is, I'll tell you, I've got just enough of an ego to want to make sure this stuff is going to be around for a very, 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 very long time. So. Mary Weaver.
So, Ken, this was is this on? It was a wonderful presentation, and it was fascinating to watch the whole process of it coming together. And with every slide, I was saying, wow, I never thought about that or never imagined how complicated it was. So clearly there's been a little, some evolution on your part. When you left the studio, you probably didn't think, now the first sculpture I'm going to do, I have to think about earthquakes or
No, it wasn't.
And I'm really
the first
interested in
sculpture
your.
I did was, how the hell am I going to make this damn thing stand up?
Well, I'm really interested in your evolution as an artist to go from doing things that are, for me would be understandable, take a block of marble and carve it, or to this, which is really an engineering feat.
Well, evolution. It's really where I'm at. I always want this one to be better than the last one, the next one to be better than this one. And it's about, I've been known to say, we'll be better tomorrow than we are today. We have to be. Without that, you know, what the hell's the sense? I want to always do better. And sometimes doing better is looking at things in different ways than you traditionally have, stepping outside your comfort zone and doing things you've never attempted before. I love to stretch my abilities. I love to take on something I have not done before. I don't want it to necessarily be easy. I kind of groove on having it be hard, you know. Well, some of it's just intuition, you know, gut feeling. But then it's enough to know to go to a pro, you know, go to someone who makes their living by doing this. You don't have to, I mean, we're not here all by ourselves. There's lots of very skilled people around, and you need to be willing to spend the money to tap into their resource and let them help carry the burden. And they're going to see things you don't see. And, you know, it's, you know, whoever it was that said that no man is an island. And I can't make, I mean, artists are notorious for being these solitary creative beings, okay? But I see a lot of value in doing cooperative works. I see a lot of value with collaborating with another artist. I see a collaboration in making the piece. I collaborate with my crew when I work. I mean, yeah, some of them have been with me for a heck of a long time, and we can have these shorthand conversations that nobody else would understand. But they come back to me with ideas. They see things I didn't see. They go, hey, how about this? And I'm just the guy who's lucky enough to bend the spark that started the flame. And it's kind of a neat position to be in once in a while. Yeah, Trudy.
You know, Ken, one of your greatest collaborative experiences, I think, this community experience, is the history piece that's downtown.
Oh, the Millennium Project.
Yeah.
Which, right here's one of my collaborators sitting in the front row, Jamie and John.
That was that, and if no one has ever, anyone's here has ever seen it and gone down and studied it, you're missing something because it's absolutely amazing.
You know what was cool about that is I got to work with 320 very dedicated people. And Mary Weaver was another. Yeah. And it was fun. It was neat. It was, you know, an experience that I've had people going, when are we going to do this again? I said, well, I don't know. When's the next millennium? You know, will we be around?
You know, Ken, it struck me when you were talking about public pieces.
You should talk loud enough. But, oh, I'm sorry, people online. See, I didn't think of that. Your involvement of the engineers and the architects and whoever makes it more public.
Yeah.
You know, you were saying, you know, you need to get this more public now, probably for this internal community.
Right.
But your collaboration really makes it a public piece in a lot of ways. You know?
Well, it does. And, you know, I really enjoyed working with Scott. Scott's the best.
Scott Hill is good. Yeah.
He is the best. And he and I clicked right along. And I really enjoyed working with Scott. And I hope that I get the opportunity to work with him again. It was really cool to work with somebody of his caliber. Chris.
Yes.
You weren't going to let me off the hook, were you?
No, not at all. Well, this was fascinating, and I know you've really given your heart and soul to this over the last many, many months. What is your next big project?
Well, we've got several of them that we're in the beginning stages of crossing our fingers, saying our prayers that we get to do the gig. But in the meantime, we've done a number of other lesser works that were commissions, and we were able to kick those out. And they got placed. Just a couple weeks ago, we finished a piece for Todd Kime and got that installed for him. And we've just, yeah, work keeps on going. But the next big one, not quite there yet. Hopefully, your table, honey. I'm sorry, you've slid to the bottom of the list. You're one notch below your mother. Okay. Yes, please.
Actually, when you were doing the dedication, the first time I heard you say that all the legs were different, and you mentioned it again tonight in terms of diversity, but as someone who's never made a sculpture before, is that purposeful in design, or was that it's just not possible to have three of the same? You just can't.
No, it
can't
was
be
very
done.
much on purpose. A lot of my works are loaded with metaphors. And people will look at that piece, and some people will say, oh, the three legs are for the Trinity. Okay. This is what I see. I'm not going to be standing out there explaining it to people. At some point or another, everyone comes along and they interpret it their way. Okay. There are some things that are obvious, that are blatant, like the 4 tenets that's printed there. And then from there, there's what they bring to it and what they take away. One thing I did forget to mention is the ceremonial flame, which we're just about ready to finish up on. There's a little plug that goes in there, and there's a locking mechanism that goes on so we don't lose our medallion. But, I was pleased with the way the ceremonial flame worked out. We ended up going with had a very sophisticated solution to it, and sometimes simple's best. And when I really got a true handle on how it might be used, we took the tiki torch approach, which is built out of parts from a hardware store and a tiki torch. And it seemed to work wonderfully when Peg ignited it for the first time. And I think that's the way we go. The only thing I was going to say, Dan, is if we find it doesn't last long enough, we'll just make the cylinder longer and add more time to how long it'll burn.
Or if I forget to bring it in.
He might have done that at the end of the dedication.
The other thing I talk about, Doc Brown and the flux capacitor. Did you notice how much that thing looks like a lightsaber? But at any rate, any other questions? Yeah, Steve.
You've been doing this a long time. Have you ever installed something somewhere and gone back to it years later? Because you have no control over the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I often wonder, like sculptors, are they ever surprised at what happens around them?
Disappointed sometimes.
Yeah, I would imagine.
I got a piece in Detroit that's a real car magnet. It's been hit now twice. Okay. And it's drunks coming out of the bar trying to turn around the traffic circle at Blue Cross Blue Shield and nicking the piece. But hey, right now, sculpture 2, drunks 0. It keeps totaling cars. Go sculpture. You run into a 37,000-pound piece of sculpture, it doesn't move. It's like the elephant. Where does he sit? Any place he wants to. Yeah. But yeah, there are times that I've been disappointed in the way things get cared for, but what are you going to do? Yeah. Yes, Trudy.
I remember when you put the the piece outside of this building, the
inverted arch.
Thank you, the inverted arch, and I can remember Damon Sloan saying, "I can't wait to see how the kids are going to put graffiti all over that." And what I appreciate so much about our students, you do something beautiful, you create something beautiful, and including any of these buildings, the art that's in this building and in the Union, the Student Center, our students honor it and they respect it, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's
And
nothing
I
has
appreciate
ever
that a
been
great
damaged.
deal. Yeah, well, I think that speaks
Salute
to
to
the
you.
institution and how we appreciate the arts. Yeah.
Plus I'd kill them.
Well, then there's that. Well, I want to thank you all. You've been very nice and very attentive. to you now.
Well, Ken, your gifts to Siena Heights University are many. And we appreciate you and the legacy that you have shared with us. Thank you so much for sharing tonight. And I invite everyone to continue the conversation in the lobby immediately following. There are refreshments, yes, yes. Although I did see a group of students go through, so.
Oh, yeah. Melissa has in her possession raffle tickets for the Woodshine Sculpture Park raffle. And this year, you know, in the past, we've done this, we've featured, well, I'll call them name brand artists. But this year, we're featuring name brand alumni and faculty artists in honor of the centennial. Melissa has $20 piece. Now, you buy one of those tickets, only 500 unprinted. You have the odds of 1 in 83 of winning something. And I want to let you know, Melissa holds the record. She has sold the most winning tickets. Wow. 68% of the winners.
Dan Pena.
They buy from Melissa. You know, I'm giving Melissa my tickets so I can buy from her. Well, you need to get busy. They shouldn't be in your office, they should be in your hand, right? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken.